Now I know it's loose, I don't know how loose it is, so just work under there with my scalpel. It's stuck well right here, it's loose completely at the bottom. No, it's popped off. There you go. Didn't put up much of a fight really. You can see the shellac that had been used to glue it onto the body, and you can see it was just stuck here, and really you can see by that little ridge of leather there, fibres of leather, that it was mostly stuck right on the corner, right on the edge. The one at this end, yeah, well, this was more firmly fixed. Let's see if that wants to come off. That's much more firmly fixed. I don't think I'm going to delve into that. That could be trouble. And here at this end, I'm just going to lift that up. Oh, that's going to come off. Look, it's going to fall off. It was held at the end, but nothing else. I wasn't going to disturb that, but probably just as well that I did. It's just about loose now. Bit of reluctance to that bottom corner, but that's all. So that'll all have to be cleaned up. Most of that shellac, I'll try scraping it off. If it doesn't want to scrape off, I'll run some sandpaper down it to get a bit of tooth on it for gluing it back. And here you can see a couple of green dots. Those are ice bumps forming, and they hadn't really made much impression in the leather, but we might just as well get rid of them now. That's on rivets. That's where there are brass rivets, probably nickel plated brass rivets coming through the aluminium, and with the dissimilar metals, probably chemicals out of the tanning of the leather and a bit of moisture. It just sets up that corrosion quite nicely. That's as far as I need to take this down, I think. The cleaning up and the putting back together is the next bit. Well, with everything pretty much stripped down now, I want to clean the camera body back up, ready for the reassembly process, which will eventually happen. So I'm just using some naphtha here on a cotton bud, and I'm just cleaning over these surfaces. I've already scraped all the big lumps off. I don't need to get every last scrap of that adhesive out. It's down in the grooves of the aluminium. It's not going to cause me any problems at all. One of the important things probably is to make sure that it's free from loose adhesive and it's free from grease, so that the new glue will stick very well. This was the end where the leather on the back was stuck fairly well. At this end it wasn't. Now I can see a lot of glue residue here, and I'm going to try another solvent, see if I can shift that. I'll try some acetone on it, just because it's visible on the chrome, and I don't want that particularly. got a particularly slippery feel there, like there may be oil on there or perhaps wax from the leather. And particularly round the back here where the bellows were glued in, that'll have to be absolutely free from anything in the way of grease or dust, so that the bellows stick very well indeed. That problem with the bellows coming loose isn't very common. Cameras this old, anything sort of 70 years old, it's worth checking, looking closely to see if there's a problem. They're by no means common for there to be a problem. It's worth checking to make sure, and typically removing the if they're loose at all, removing the bellows entirely, cleaning everything and gluing them back again is the answer. If they're just coming loose at the corner and you just patch up the glue, put some glue in the corner to hold it, it's probably not going to be a lasting fix. Well, I can see discoloration on the aluminium there, which basically means that there's a degree of corrosion in that aluminium, but I don't think that's going to cause me a problem. Let's give that a scratch at this corner, see what that's like. That's just paint there. That's fine. So I've got the cavity cleaned out now. That's good. And in the back of the camera, that's pretty dusty. I'll have to get in here with a dry paintbrush and shift that dust, just like that. Now usually that's all that's required. If there's grease floating around the place, then you're going to need to use some solvent to shift things, but there's not really much sign of that here. Now the body casting. At this point there's a little bit of damage there, and I'm fairly confident that happened when whoever tried to get in here and stop the take-up shaft from rotating here, where they've tried to grab that with the pliers. That's the same time they snapped the top off that, and they probably also damaged the edge of the body here slightly with the pliers. That's doesn't cause any functional problem, and if you weren't aware it was there, you would never see it. It's I'm aware of it just because I know that's the sort of damage that easily happens, and it confirms my suspicions that somebody'd been in there with a pair of pliers and had done that. The top of the body. Well, the top of the body's not bad, it's fairly clean. I've already got rid of all the dust that was on here, and it wasn't bad at all. So I'll just wipe around this surface. There's no serious corrosion on this, on the body edges, which tells me that the camera probably wasn't splashed, or at least wasn't splashed seriously. That the corrosion I see on the chrome and various other places is probably the result of just being stored somewhere damp, and that will certainly do it. The staining on the casting at this point, yeah, you can see it better there. Round here, that's where the leather had been loose, and that's just atmospheric, and moisture has done that, I'd say. That staining, of course, is of no concern to us because it's going to be underneath the leather. And the leather was in good shape. That is pretty much the body casting sorted out as far as I need to sort that out at the moment. So I'll pop that to one side because the next thing I really want to look at is these bellows. So if there's any dry, crusty corrosion products on there, I'll need to scrape it off like this. You can see that white rubbish coming away. Just need to get the bulk of it off because as you see it does come away, and you don't want that as a layer in between your adhesive and the metal, otherwise it's not likely to end up staying there very long. And you can see here where it's lost the outer skin, where that had been stuck off, that had come away on the body. It's a bit lumpy down these inside edges, that's where the residue had squeezed out. I'm not going to seriously try and tidy that up. The leather is probably fairly fragile. Get the loose bits off there at this end. That'll do. The bellows seem to be in good condition. So these can be glued in. So what do I do? Well, I use contact adhesive, which is what I usually know for sticking the leather, usually use for putting the leatherettes on anyway, or leather, but I don't normally use it as a contact adhesive. I'll put a layer on that aluminium, exposed aluminium there, and I'll put a big layer, on here on the leather, and I'll leave those, let them cure right out and dry. And that's my base layer really. Then I'll come back, apply another fresh layer of adhesive on top of that onto the bellows. Then put the bellows in place, make sure I've got them centered up, and just leave them to set basically. Press them back, leave them to set. That adhesive will be wet. I won't let it dry, so it's not going to snap into place as contact adhesive does. It'll allow me to position them, but it'll cure up well okay. That'll stick that really nicely. Better than it had been stuck originally, and it'll see me out. Well, as you can see, I've been busy while you were fast asleep, and I've got the leather back on there. Glued down that loose corner too while I was at it. And one last thing, in this particular model, there's a light trap on the hinge end, right at the in there, and what it consists of basically is black yarn, and so that was split away, some of it was missing, and I thought, well, I better replace that, so I've removed it completely and I've glued in a fresh piece of black yarn, and it's just the edge of the door here bites into that yarn. I don't know that's exactly essential. A lot of the models didn't have it. Some of the early models had more of an overlap on the metal there. But regardless of that, it's all done anyway. So the leather's back on the body. I had one problem here. It's not going to focus. Right at this point, a piece of leather just broke away when I was cleaning the leather there, scraping the adhesive off the back, and it sort of fragmented and turned to rubbish basically, just disappeared. So it wasn't in a fit state to put back, so I just cut a scrap of leather from here, just a piece of scrap leather from my collection, and glued that in to the corner, but it's pretty invisible. I can hardly see it. I know where to look. I've got to glue the bellows back in here, and to do that I need to put some adhesive around that frame first. That's the first task, and a layer on here. So let's see if I can do this. I can be fairly generous with the adhesive here, so I want to build up a good base layer. That'll do. There's a bald spot there. Let's see if I can spread that out a bit. And here I need to put it along the edges of the bellows, so this is a bit trickier. So I'll squirt some into this container and just transfer it to the bellows on a toothpick, so I can see that it goes exactly where it's needed and not where I don't need it. And the adhesive I'm putting on here and on the body there, that can be allowed to dry out completely now. Once it's fully dry, I'll put another layer of fresh adhesive on one piece, on the bellows, and then push them into place. And they will stick like the proverbial. Right, this can stay here for an hour or 3 and let that glue dry out. I've got other exciting things to do. Okay, so that layer of glue has certainly had plenty of time to cure. Now I'm going to apply some fresh glue to the bellows, and then I'm going to just pop them in place. That'll do nicely. Now I've got to decide which way up these ones went. Yes, I think that's it. Just need to see that I've got them centered up and square in the body. They will certainly tolerate a little bit of off-centre, but not a lot. That looks very good. Well, I can just leave that there now, and that adhesive can cure. And since it's just about the end of the day here, well, no, it's not really, but it's close enough to the end of the day for my purposes, that this can just wait until tomorrow, and I'll be ready to start putting things back together in that body casting by that stage. I'll slide that to one side. Well, these struts are very dirty. They're not in bad shape apart from that by the looks of it. They're very sticky with old grease. I've got to get all that rubbish off here. There's a bit of corrosion in patches. It probably won't cause any problems. It just looks ugly. I'll see if I can get this old grease to come off here. It's actually stained the metal in it at this point. If oils are left long enough, they tend to lose all their volatile components, and they'll often sort of dry out into a hard lacquer. And that's pretty much what's happened here, I think. Most of this filth's coming off easily enough. It's looking much better. Yeah, there's certainly a lot of dried oil and so forth in here where the levers run on that shaft, so I'll clean them as best I can, and I'll apply some molybdenum paste on that rod to lubricate that in the future. Little patch of corrosion just here. Checking it to see if there's anything serious. It's really just on the surface. These struts are comparatively clean as these things go. Often they're caked up with dust and grit, which of course the grease attracts and holds in place. But these don't seem to be suffering from that to any great extent. You can clean things like this in the ultrasonic cleaner. The only thing that's likely to happen in a case like this is that the little arrowhead with the painted arrow there for the focus, that paint would tend to disappear if you put it through the ultrasonic cleaner. You could always put it back afterwards. These two levers here and here, their job is to stop you being able to collapse the front of the camera if you haven't returned the focus scale to the infinity position. Of course, like all good things like that, if you apply enough force you can always overcome them, but they do tend to remind you that there's probably something you should be doing before you push the buttons as hard as you possibly can. Well, they look fine. And looking at this, just seeing if these arms are bent at all. Now the inner arms should be dead straight. They should just be flat through there. The outer arms should be dished slightly, so they stick out more at the ends than they do in the centre, just slightly, and that gives you some tension, which acts to push these buttons up into position when you pull the standard out all the way to the normal open position. I'm just checking there's enough shape to those. Yeah, I think there is. That looks good. So those struts look good. I'll lubricate those with a touch of molybdenum paste before I put them into the body, but they don't look like they'll be a problem at all. Having a look at this fairly disgusting focus mount here, and the grease in this looks pretty hard and dry. Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, that doesn't really want to come loose at all. You can see from the discoloration here that grease is dried right out. That's like a lacquer there. That's a hard layer, fairly impervious to solvent. See how that goes. Oh, there's still dried hard grease in the edges there, right in the edges of that recess. And all on the sides too. That's all got to be cleaned out. Quite good. Of course, the hard part to clean is the space in between the posts and the body. Okay, took a bit of solvent in there and on that side, and have a poke at it with a toothpick, see if I can loosen up that rubbish. And the same on the other side. Well, that looks pretty promising. I think that'll probably just about be okay. Just get that little bit of scunge out from there. Very good. So what's next?